right? And so in the early days, it might come really easy, but then there's going to hit a point where it's going to start petering out as you start to have a larger share of the market. There's less upward mobility, and you might start slowing down. And if you're running on a really low margin environment, say in the wholesale game, if using that as an example, and you have a 3% margin, that's going to get harder and harder as you get bigger to expand that margin, unless you can bring in some operational efficiencies. And so one of the things that I always I attack ruthlessly is the expenses and the operational efficiencies, and saying, how could we do this better? What are the expenses that we could eliminate? And this is one of the things that Elon Musk does really well. And I'm not putting myself in the same category as Elon by any means, but what he does is he thinks about starting from first principles and saying, okay, how do we cut the cost of sending a spaceship into space? Okay, well, what if we controlled the smelting process for the materials all the way from iron ore all the way to the end user experience of sending it up to space? If we cut out all that middleman manufacturing, then we can control that cost, right? Or the same with the batteries. If I go and buy the raw materials, the nickel, the whatever other materials that you need to build a battery, I don't actually know what you need. Then you can just build your own batteries. And that's what he did. He realized, hey, I can create the gigafactories. I can produce more batteries. I can flood the market with this for way cheaper than anybody could produce it for me. And so that's I come from a manufacturing. That's one thing that I really like, is controlling every aspect of the process that would downstream lead to operational efficiencies. A lot of times, there's this tendency in the early days of a business to outsource to like a third party company who specializes in a thing, but then you become beholden to them, and you're never able to wean yourself off, because as you grow, you become more dependent on them. And so, especially in the early years, I like to think about, okay, what are all the capabilities that we could keep in house and control? Because when you control it, you can minimize the expenses much easier than when it's somebody else who their prices are going to rise over the years, or the quality of service they're going to give you is less. And that's one of the ways that we really distinguish ourselves in the manufacturing space. Was everybody else was outsourcing to other companies that were doing what we were